the requirement for this project was to create an application where a user can go and see a map that displays like local restaurants around his location. And he should also be able to read other users' reviews on these restaurants. He should be able to add his own reviews and also have the option to add a restaurant to this application himself. When you visit the site first, you have a large header section here, and I just put the title here and a tagline. And then there's a button that would actually take you straight to the map. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm just going to scroll through it. So here I just have a few icons that explain the basic functionality of the site. Then I added a slideshow that shows like some more of the popular restaurants and some reviews about these restaurants. And then I just added like these quotes from apparent frequent users of the site that kind of like highlight how great the site is and its usability and like benefit to their life. Then there's the heart of the site, the map itself, and then just here on the bottom I have a footer section with contact information and then social media buttons. So in the center of the map is a flag that shows the user's current location, which is actually my current location right now. And around that are all the local restaurants. And these same restaurants that are placed here with markers are also displayed on the left with this list. So these are all of the restaurants you are currently seeing on this map. So this list actually has a filter on top, so you can filter out by rating. So let's say you just want to see some restaurants with the worst ratings, because that's more obvious right now if I do it. So if I wanted to see just restaurants with 1 to 2 stars, it will actually only display them on the list, the 2 restaurants, and then also on the map. And if you, for example, were to zoom out on the map, it's slow right now, then you see it just added another restaurant because this is now actually within the bounds of the map. Okay, when the user clicks on a restaurant in the map, like here, Bronco, which has currently an average rating of 4.7 stars, it sets this item as active in the list. So it has like this turquoise background, and it opens this restaurant info modal with the restaurant's name, a street view where you can actually look around, and then the latest 3 ratings. And the great thing about this application is actually that it is connected to a real-time database, the Google Firebase. Here is the actual database for all of the restaurants that are currently being displayed. And the first one is the one I just showed you. It's Bronco, and here you see the 3 ratings or 3 reviews for it. So I'm just gonna show how I add a review to this. So you click the button on here, and it actually displays the restaurant's name in here again. And then you can make a selection from the radio buttons and just add a review. If you were to not add anything and submit it, it would tell you have to add a comment there. So to just write, you know what, for the sake of this presentation, I'm just gonna write make a bad review. So you see how the average score, which is currently at 4.7, goes down. So if I submit it, you see it instantly right here. And then when I close it, it went down to 3.8. And now when I go back into the database, you see that this has been added right away. And also what you might have noticed that whenever you actually click on a restaurant, it also opens the info window for the corresponding marker on the map. And you also have the option to just click on any marker on the map and it will do the same thing, like as if you clicked on the list item. So it actually opens the restaurant info modal. And this one has actually more reviews, so you can see what that looks like on here. The user can also add a new restaurant, like I said earlier. So if you hover over the button, it actually explains how to do it. So you need to click on a location in the map and then click on this button. So if the user ignores this and just clicks on there, you get an alert that you actually have to click the location of the restaurant you want to add, and then the address information will be filled in automatically. So let's say I want to add a restaurant here, and I click the button again. I get this new modal that asks me to fill in the restaurant's name. And as you can see, this information is already filled out and the fields are unavailable, so the user cannot make any changes to that. And then I can just add a rating and submit it. And once that is done, it automatically opens the new restaurant info window, shows the review, the street view, and when you look on the map where I've placed it, it shows the marker and then the name of the restaurant. And if I go back into the database to the very bottom, there, this now has been added, Pizza Heaven, and you can see the rating is right here, 5 stars. Also, when you add a new restaurant, okay, now because I scroll around, you don't see it. It's always added here to the end of the list as well. And yeah, that's the basic functionality of the site. At the very top, I have my variables. Then I'm getting a reference to my Firebase database. And the first thing I'm doing is getting the restaurant data. So I'm making an AJAX request to my Firebase database. And if that is, if this one actually contains information, so there are restaurants in the database, I'm getting these restaurants and I'm storing them in my restaurants array. Otherwise, if there's no data in there, I run my function get restaurants from file. And that is actually this file, the restaurants.json file, which contains only 4 fake restaurants. So in order to do that, I make a JSON, an AJAX request, get the JSON data, and then store that in my restaurants array. And because of course I want to have more restaurants that actually exist in my area, I make a Google Maps AJAX request. But in order to do that, I first have this AJAX pre-filter, which adds headers to my request, because I need to tell the browser that even though my application is running on my local domain, I'm getting resources from the Google Map API. And here I'm actually running the AJAX request, where I get restaurants from the Google Maps API within a radius of 1,000 meters. And I pass the results I receive into my callback function, which I'll explain a bit further down. And then I'm refreshing my list and map. This function will actually pop up more often, so I'll explain it later too. But this basically just generates the list on the left, and also puts like the markers on the map. Next, I'm generating my map. So I'm creating a new Google map, and I'm just centering it around the random spot on the Earth. And then I use the HTML5 geolocation to get the user's current position, and I'm storing that in the position variable here. And then I'm centering the map around the user's position, and I'm also creating the flag marker that is on the same position. And then I'm checking the bounds of the map. So this function basically runs through my restaurants array and checks which of these restaurants is within the current bounds of the map, and whichever are get stored in a new array called visible restaurants. And from that array, I'm placing the markers on the map. So I'm only placing markers of restaurants that are actually visible at the moment. And then I'm creating a list from that same visible restaurants array. And here I have an event listener that listens to 2 events. One is for when the user changes the center of the map, and one is when the zoom is changed. So every time the user makes a change, I run my function refresh list and map, which I'm gonna explain now. Just it's a bit down here. Yeah, it's here. So every time the user zooms or scrolls or does anything, I need to check the bounds of the map again. But before I do that, I want to make sure that whatever restaurant is currently active in the list, so that is actually marked, stays marked the entire time. So I'm getting that restaurant's name and I'm storing it in this variable so that later I can find it again and set it as active again. So then I'm just emptying the entire list. I'm deleting all the markers, and then I'm checking the bounds again to find out which restaurants are now within the bounds. And then I'm calculating the average rating for each of the visible restaurants. And I need this to check if the user has made any changes to the filters, so that the restaurants that are being displayed are actually within the selected filter values. And finally, I'm creating a new list. And then I'm looping through all of the visible restaurants, trying to find the restaurant that was previously active, and if it actually is within that new visible restaurants array, then I set this one to active again, and I scroll it into view, which basically means it's at the top of the list all the time. And then I'm placing the markers on the map for the visible restaurants. Okay, let me just go back up to where I left off. So yeah, this is where here I'm creating a new Google Maps geocoder. And what this does is I have this event listener that listens to the user's click on the map. So every time he clicks a location, I store the coordinates in this location array. And then later I use the geocoder to turn the coordinates into actual addresses, like like house numbers, zip codes, and all of that. This is my callback function. So for whenever I receive results from the Google Maps API, so I loop through all of these and create a new object for each one of them. So I'm passing in the information into a format that I'm already using in my JSON file and also in my database. And then I'm pushing each of these new restaurant objects into my restaurants array, and then I'm updating the database. So they're also included in the database. And whenever I update my database, this basically means I'm just writing all of the new restaurants onto the database. This is the function I was just talking about, the geocode function, where I pass in my location array with the coordinates where the user has just clicked, and I'm storing the information into these variables, which I'll be using later. And here I'm creating a new class called new restaurant object. So every time the user clicks on an item in the list, this item gets turned into an object, which makes it much easier to work with it or to retrieve data from it or to change its data. This would probably make more sense like once I explain how I actually set up the list. But just for now, I'm like grabbing all of the attributes, because in the attributes of each of the list items, I'm already storing important information like latitude, longitude, its average rating, and all of that. And I'm passing it into this object. And then this restaurant object has its own method called show restaurant info. And whenever this runs, it basically opens the restaurant info modal where it shows the street view, the latest reviews, and it also passes in the restaurant name, and it will open the info window for the corresponding marker for that restaurant. Here I have my check bounds function, which I've already explained, where I just loop through and check which restaurant is within the bounds. And this right here is where I actually set up the list. So when I want to create a list, I create a new unordered list element. Then I loop through all of the average rating. And then for each of them, I create a new list element. And from the visible restaurant, I'm taking all of the necessary information and I'm passing it in as attributes for that list item. And here I'm basically like just setting the rating and creating the new string for each of the comments the user has have left. And finally, I am appending all of these list items to my unordered list. And here I'm just adding 2 Bootstrap classes. This is my function for just emptying the list. This one is called update list. So what this does is, for example, when a user adds a new review and a new rating, every time this happens, I need to update the average rating of the restaurant in the list, and that is what this function is for. This is the refresh list and map function I've already explained. And this is how I place the markers on the map. So again, I look through all of the visible restaurants. I get each restaurant's location, and then I place a marker on this location, and I set the title for the marker to that specific restaurant's name. Then I create a marker, an info window, sorry, for each of my markers, and I set the title for that marker to the marker's title. So it always displays the restaurant's name. And then I push these markers into my markers array. And here I have an event listener for a click on such a marker. First, I close any previously opened info windows, and then I open that specific marker's info window. And then I have a function called activate list item, which is actually down here. And what this does is that when a user clicks on a marker, the rest of the application will behave as if the user has actually clicked on a list item itself. So wherever, if he clicks on a marker or a list item, it's always gonna behave the same way. So when he does that, I actually turn that list item he clicked on into a restaurant object, like I explained earlier, and then I run my method show restaurant info. And finally, I just scroll the item that the restaurant that the user has clicked. I scroll it into view on the list, so it's at the top of the list. Here I have my function for deleting the markers. This is for just showing the street view where I pass in the position of the restaurant. This one sets the name of the modal, so where the user makes the review, so that the name of the restaurant gets passed in. This one just closes all the info windows. And this one is for adding a new review. So whatever selection the user makes with the radio buttons or whatever comment he adds in gets stored in these two variables. And then I turn that into a string and I add that to my list object or to the restaurant in the list. And then I empty the current reviews and just add this new review to the modal. And then I'm also adding the new stars. Here I'm calculating the new average rating for the restaurant because of the user's new rating. And finally, I'm also adding the new average rating to the list object, and I'm updating my database. And here I'm just writing the text for the list where it says such and such has this average rating. And then I'm just refreshing the list and map again to display the new rating in the restaurant of the restaurant and opening the corresponding info window.
Yeah.
So this is just a section for all of the event listeners. So when a user clicks on a list item, that it actually gets activated and that the window opens. These are event listeners for when the user makes changes to the sliders so that the list and map get refreshed with the selections he's made. This is for when a new review is made that it actually runs. And then this one is for adding a new restaurant. So here first I check if the user has actually clicked a place on the map before. So because that would be stored in a location array. If that is empty, then it runs the alert, and otherwise it takes the values that I've or the variables or the values from the variables that I've previously made and puts them into the modal. This one is for adding a new restaurant. So again, I'm storing the information the user puts in, such as the restaurant name and the values in these variables. I create a new info window and marker for this new restaurant. I store that marker in my markers array. Then I set the contents of the info window. Then I create a new JSON object for that new restaurant. So it's in the same format that I've been using. I push that into my restaurants array. I update my database so it's included. Then I refresh my list and map. And then I create a new list item for this restaurant. I set it as active. I scroll it into view. And then I turn it into an object. And then I run my show restaurant info function. And finally, I'm just resetting the modal. And down here, I just have a few more specifications like regarding like the looks of it. So this is the jQuery slider where I just set the minimum maximum value. This is the tooltip for when you hover over the add restaurant button. And this is just setting the interval for my slideshow. And then these set autofocuses on the input fields in the forms where the user can actually enter something. And then this one I have function, it checks the screen size of the user. So if it's below 800 pixels, I made it so that the site looks a bit different because there is so much information in it, so that there's actually a separate burger menu at the bottom, because I actually have it open here. So here I have it in an Apple iPhone 6s. As you can see here, like it doesn't actually show the list of restaurants. You can go here, there's this burger menu that's actually sticking to the bottom. And when you click on it, it says show all local restaurants or add your favorite restaurant. And when you click on there, you actually get the list like displayed like that. And then the rest is basically the same functionality. And if you flip it, it just looks a bit different. And then it's also different if you were to view it on an iPad, because the screen is a bit wider there. So in this case, the list is on the side, but a bit smaller than on a regular screen. But if you were to flip it to portrait, then the list is gone and you get the burger menu. So that's basically like what all of the code here at the bottom does. And then finally, I took this code from W3 Schools that turns the menu, the burger menu that I have at the bottom, into a sticky menu, because the one that Bootstrap comes with is actually a static menu and not sticky. And that's why I added that. But that's it.